Welcome to Commander Central episode 17. We are recording, as always, in Wisconsin, where the age of consent is 18. So if future Alabama Senator Roy Moore is listening, we are simultaneously not yet legal and too old for you. Today we'll get into some news in the world of EDH. We will dig into social media, and then we will do a deck tech on a budget Doran the Siege Tower list. All of that and more coming your way on Commander Central. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
How's everyone doing this evening?
I could be in bed right now.
We went from like 65 degrees on Monday to like 15 degrees right now outside.
Oh, God, it is cold.
And, I mean, this is like the next 4 months for us, so we should just embrace it, I guess. But, man, that's just a harsh change to deal with.
The shock. It's the initial shock. After that, you just get used to it.
Right.
Yeah.
But right, today and yesterday and the next couple days are going to be rough, just kind of psyching myself up for this.
Yeah, no jacket on Monday and now having to dig out everything for the foreseeable future.
Matt, you're wearing a stocking. You guys are both wearing hats right now, stocking caps right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I should be. Right. Well, I just a real brief story that's kind of tangentially related to this time of year. So I finished off the last of my Thanksgiving leftovers today at work.
Oh, God, they couldn't have been good.
Well, and then somebody's like, it was just a roll. It actually wasn't even anything. I had a couple rolls left, so I just put peanut butter and jelly on them for peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because why waste them?
Okay.
So it wasn't like it was turkey there or anything.
I was seriously wondering. I'm like, you're going to come
bread.
down with like salmonella or something.
But one of my coworkers like, is that Thanksgiving leftover rolls? And then I got self-conscious about it. I'm like, no, they're ones we made for Christmas that I just didn't want to freeze yet. And I was like, oh, all right, because that would have been. But I thought of, I'm like, how long has it been? Is this weird? Am I like eating leftovers way too late? And I got the same reaction from you guys. So, so lying about it apparently was
going
the
on
right
2
move.
weeks now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why when you were like leftovers, I'm thinking like stuffing,
Right,
turkey,
right.
mashed
No, it
potatoes.
was-
I'm like, those could not be good.
That did not survive more than 3 or 4 days.
Sweet
in my house. Yeah.
potatoes, ham.
So how about games this week? Anything cool get played?
I played for the first time in a couple weeks.
You played. You didn't have very good luck again. You had a rough go of it.
I had better luck than the last time I played.
You were playing, but you just got targeted pretty hard.
Yeah, when you hit someone for 16 commander damage on turn 5, you tend to get targeted quickly.
And didn't you draw 12 cards or something stupid off
I
it too?
drew 16 cards
off
and
it
had to
too.
discard down to 7.
Were you playing Jamoka?
I
Yeah.
was.
Okay. Makes sense.
And then you kind of got targeted
Yep.
pretty hard after that.
Yeah.
But you recast Ramoka a bunch of times that game,
The
for sure.
last time I cast her, she costed me 18. Green
Not hard
white.
in a green deck, though.
And it's
Well,
ramping.
You did have that one turn where you're like, okay, so I'm going to cast Explosive Vegetation and Sky Shroud Claim and Nature's Lore and Kadama's Reach past turn.
That was my
Oh,
discard. I literally I drew
wow.
all those cards. I'm like, I'm going to keep one land and all these ramp spells. I'm good. And it was bad because my opening hand had a Riftstone Portal in it. And I did the math. I'm like, okay, if I play this, draw the cards, I'll have to move to discard, and I can discard the Riftstone Portal. And for those who don't know, when it normally taps for colorless, but if it's in your graveyard, all lands you control tap for green or white. Well, I made the idiot play and played a land, cast the spell to let me draw, and went to the end of my turn. I'm like, I have 7 cards in my hand. What did I do wrong? And I realized I played a basic land. I'm like, no.
Then the next turn you had to discard a bunch, and
I had played Riftstone Portal because
Yeah.
I needed that land to deal all the spells to make Jamoka 16, 19 or something.
Well, it is brand new in the deck. You just put
Right.
it in this week, so that's an easy
That's when
flub
you
to
just
make.
ghost quarter it and
Right.
get
That's
it in
true,
there
I
and
guess.
get a land
right.
out of it.
Don't talk to me about Ghost Quarter. I screwed that play up too. Don't worry.
I will say, yeah, you did. You ghost quartered an island of mine because I had one island left
Yep.
up.
And-
He ghost quartered it, and I'm like, well, I'll tap it to float
The mana.
the mana. And actually, I had a double roll. I think
Yep.
Gauntlet of Power or something. So I tapped it to float 2.
I moved phases
And then I went and got another island and put it back into play.
because I forgot it comes in untapped.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah, that happened too.
I feel like a rookie again.
Well, speaking of rookies, my next door neighbor and his friend, the two of them showed up last night to play at the card shop for the first time ever.
Yep.
These guys have been playing like for 3 months.
Not even.
Yeah, not even. And I did have the thought at one point playing against Steve. I'm like, oh, he just cast Time Stretch, and he has a doubler in play. He couldn't double it that turn because he had to use all his mana. I'm like, so he could have just taken 4 turns right there. I'm like, okay, I don't need to pull punches anymore.
They are
No, he has arrived effectively as a commander player. I just need to prepare to be just crushed from here on out when I'm playing against him.
Steve and Mike, this is your official warning. You
Right.
are no longer beginners. Welcome to the club.
Exactly.
I learned that very carefully in the 5-man pod that I was stuck in.
Yeah, playing my mono white planeswalkers deck.
Yes, when playing against 2 Aloro decks, a
Ugh.
Mizzix deck, and then my buddy Nate sat down and played the Spirit
Geist.
Geist. There we go.
His 1v1 Geist.
No, he changed it up for multiplayer.
Oh, it is a
'cause
multiplayer
he has
deck now.
1v1 set up, so he swapped it out so he could play multiplayer.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So, and after playing them and playing a Stacks Aloro deck, I don't think if he realizes that that's exactly what it is, but like every turn it's like, you lose 1 life, and then I do this and you lose 1 life, and then I do this and you lose 1 life, and I'm just like, oh no.
Was that the other guy I didn't know in your pod, or was that Mike's?
That was Mike's.
What?
See, seriously, they're getting serious.
It was very serious. But they did allow me to alt a Johnny. I think it's Caller of Pride, maybe. It's the M15 one that allows all sorts of damage, only deal 1 damage to you.
Yes, yep.
Which does not work when you're losing life, just so
Sure.
everybody knows.
No, it does not. No, that's not Caller Pride. Caller Pride's alt is create the X cat tokens
Okay, that's
where
the 3-drop. I don't remember which one it is. It's the 4-drop from M15.
Yeah, because that in that deck, you think you're safe, but against 2 Aloro decks, it's a lot of life loss effects.
And they
probably.
have a lot of life gain.
Sure, right.
So I'm like hanging on by the skin of my teeth, creating Gideon into a creature, plussing a Johnny to make Gideon stronger, gaining a little bit of life, passing the turn, losing all that life I gained just to do it again the next turn.
Ugh.
And that game went like 2.5 hours or something stupid like that.
Easily.
Last night was the night of 5-man pods. You and Dana and I played in a couple 5-player games. Chris played in a couple 5-player games.
And we put a picture of it wasn't even too messy, actually. When Max took the picture, we put it on social media, and it wasn't even too huge of a mess, but it was a 5-man pod for sure, and it took forever.
Yep.
Well, speaking of social media, Chris.
Oh, you can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. Search us up on Facebook, CMDR Central, or find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
And you can also find us on Patreon by searching CMDR Central. And we would like to give a shout out to our newest Patreon, Henry Stukenborg. And we will get in touch with you in the future to discuss your $5 Patreon reward.
Good deal. And we also mentioned last week the Twitter handle of a Patreon from last week, but it actually was Nate Burgess, who used to be on the Commander podcast and now is one of the hosts of Commander Time. So we just used his Twitter handle last week just out of force of habit. But thank you very much, Nate, for that last week as well.
Yep.
Yeah, so that name that you had, Max,
Yep.
We got a thing from Twitter. I just remembered about this.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to butcher his name again, but I'm probably going to. Leon Langer or something like that.
I
The
think
Germany guy.
I thought it was Lion Langer. I just assumed it was Lion because that sounds cool.
But he loved that we butchered his name.
Yes, he did.
So. We also heard from Adam Darby at Hedgemon78. He wants to know if we'll get a deck tech on, as he put it, the quotation E deck, which means Dana's Edric deck for everyone.
I think maybe at some point this year we can do that. The only hesitation I have about it is it's not probably that different than most Edric decks.
No.
And there's a few cards that are different. I'm not running any extra turn stuff, but it's much more aggro based than it is like looping in extra turns. So I don't know if it'll be that fascinating, but I think maybe we'll do it.
Yeah, I think I responded saying we'll slot it into the 2018 calendar somewhere.
We'll try to do it at some point.
Yeah, we could do a quick rundown because, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's pretty basic as what the rest of them are.
Yeah, and one thing about Edric, I mean, it's a cheap deck
Yes.
for the most part. I have a Guy's Cradle in it. But like aside from that, and I think there's a Force of Will in it.
And a pact.
And a Pact of Negation. And I'll probably will put a Mana Drain in it at some point. So I guess it's not cheap now. But take out the 5 most expensive cards, and it's probably a $30 deck. I mean, nothing's expensive in it.
No, nothing at all.
So yeah, we'll do that at some point.
So we also heard from Nick Sikowski on our YouTube channel. Underneath our video about utility lands, he asked, on a more serious note, it would be very beneficial if you guys could put pictures of the cards on the screen. It would be very much appreciated.
It would be very beneficial. We don't have the time to do it right now. Basically, right now, we're taking the audio from the podcast and just converting it to a video automatically. I would like to start doing that at some point, hopefully in 2018. We haven't figured out the logistics of it yet. Max usually edits on Sunday, and then we post on Monday. So if we wanted to do video with cards on it, we'd have to change the editing schedule a little bit. I'm not sure how easily we can do that, or push back when we post it. But we'll try to figure something out, because I would like to have something on in terms of the YouTube videos, showing the cards we're talking about or showing deck lists. I think I am going to start putting show notes on YouTube as well, just so it's all in one spot.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a good feedback point, and we will try to do that moving forward. So let's get into the show. Today we're going to talk about Doran the Siege Tower. So Octavio Quiones Flores contacted us with his a list he's working on for a friend of a budget Doran deck. And we're going to do a deck tech on that deck because he was generous enough to support us on Patreon for 3 consecutive months. So we really appreciate it.
Yes.
And to do so, we're going to do a deck tech on a deck he's making for a friend of his. This is also one that's kind of familiar to us because our friend Adam Darby, who just wrote us on Twitter, who we read, just built a Doran deck like a month or so ago.
Yep.
And we all helped him a little bit with that as well. So this is something that we kind of have a little bit of experience working on. So first things first, for those that don't know, we might as well tell you what Doran the Siege Tower is.
He's a beater.
He is a beater.
Kind of.
He's one of the most unique commanders out there in terms of the play style.
Yep.
He's Abzan. He's a black, a green, and a white, so 3 mana to cast. He's a legendary tree folk shaman with power 0, toughness 5, and he has a very simple ability. Each creature assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. That's each creature, not just your creatures. That's
Everybody.
Any creature in play deals damage based on its toughness and not its power.
You notice when you play against this deck, too, just how many of your creatures have more power than toughness.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it screws up your combat math a little bit. There's been enough times when I'm like, okay, I can do this or this, and then I realize Doran's in play, and I'm like, oh, that just totally changes what my plays were.
You guys have that problem more often than I do. My 2 main decks have bigger butts than
That's
than
true.
heads.
Yeah, yeah.
Dramoka's a 5/7, Brago's a 2/4. I love playing against Doran.
Well, Octavio describes this deck thusly. This deck is trying to use tree folk and defenders and a splash of other creatures with high defense to take out my opponents. I feel like I need more creatures in this deck, and I definitely need some tutors and draw. I'm just not sure what to cut. So, let's get into all of that. First things first, since it's an easy one to go into, let's talk about his lands.
Sure thing.
So he's running 36. What are your thoughts on 36 lands in a 3-color deck?
I would definitely up the count, but it also becomes hard. You got to really decide how you're going to do it. Like if you're going low curve, then you don't have to up the count too high. If you're going high curve, which what he's looking for in Tree Folk, which are all 4 mana plus usually, then you want to up even more. So I'm guessing about 38 is where I would go with it.
I wrote down 37 to at least 37, but probably no more than 38 as well.
I think I went up to 39.
Did you?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
So we definitely agree you need a couple more, I think.
Yep.
Primarily, not even just because of the casting cost so much as having more lands guarantees you get the color mix you want, or makes it easier to get the color mix you want.
Correct.
Particularly in this deck where there's not a lot of, you're not running ABUR duels, you're not running shocks, you're not running the good fetches.
Yep.
Having more lands makes it easier to hit one of each color versus you can be a little bit leaner if you're playing a 2-color deck or if you're playing with a bunch of fetches. I don't know if I'd be comfortable doing that here.
No.
Well, I did look up, speaking of shocks, I looked up the price on shocks, and your Temple Garden's running about $9, your Overgrown Tomb is $8.50, and the Godless Shrine is $11.
Yep.
So it's not like they're the really spendy ones neither.
So the 3 shocks are pretty close, because I think, what did he say? You wanted the cards under 10?
So yeah, when we talked to Octavio about this, I asked him, do you have a budget constraint? Because obviously we don't want to recommend AURB duels.
Yep.
So his recommendation was, since he's building it for a friend as a holiday gift, he wanted no single card upgrade to be more than $10.
Okay.
So it put a little challenge for me, at least, thinking, let's shove all these shocks in, and okay, Godless Shrine is more than 10. I can't put that in there.
Yeah. I mean, just at that point, I wanted to look them up just so there was a basic understanding of what they would be, and it would actually keep you on curve faster. And
yeah.
Well, in this color combination probably is one of the most friendly in terms of shock lands.
Yep.
Yes.
Land base in general, it's pretty friendly. I mean, even if you were to go into the duels in the future for who he's building the deck for, they are the cheapest duels to get usually, too.
Yeah.
Except for the black-green one.
Yeah. Forget everything I just said. I totally spaced that card, spiked in price recently.
Value is not cheap. So let's. We don't need to go over every single land because you are kind of limited to what you can run. Does anybody have any particular lands that they think should be added or ones that really jump out that should be removed?
I have a few.
All right.
So I took out Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, the Guild Gates, and the Temples.
Okay.
And I replaced them with 2 of the Shocks, the Overgrown Tomb and the Temple Garden, Canopy Vista, because that's like not even a $2 card. And it's
fetchable.
And it's fetchable. I put in Path to Ancestry, and that's from this year's Commander. You name a creature type, and when you cast a creature with the mana it produces of that type, you can scry 1. Otherwise, it creates any color mana, whether you use it for a non-creature spell or not. And I'll get more into that later when we move on to creatures and stuff.
My only concern there, and I had a concern, I thought about that, but because there's also an unclaimed territory in this deck, which works with creature types. There's only 14 tree folk in the deck plus Doran. So like even if you pick tree folk for the creature type, there's going to be enough times when, a lot of times, like at that point, 3/4 of your spells don't work with the land in terms of making colored mana.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's fine, but that felt like it wasn't enough for the creature type lands.
Yeah, I get where you're going with that. I think we each took a little bit of a different path with this deck. So I think when we get to that point and we can talk it out, it'll make a little more sense. I also threw in all the check lands, so Isolated Chapel, Woodland Cemetery, and Sun Petal Grove.
I like the check lands or the pain lands as well over the Scry Temples from Theros.
Yeah.
They're a little...
Over the temples, really?
Over the temples. In a 3-color deck. Like, I think a temple's fine in a 2-color deck because you're running one of them. I think 3 lands that come into play tapped is a lot.
Okay, because I'm looking through the list right now, and he currently has all the guild gates in here.
Yeah.
And I would take out the guild gates
over
the temples
I take them out before the temples for sure.
Yep.
But if I came down to it and I still had room, I just don't love 3 temples in a 3-color deck. I just think that's a lot of lands coming into play tapped. But yeah, I agree. The guild gates would come out first.
For budget constraints, I would definitely pull 2 of the guild gates, depending on your color curve, and put in more basic lands. You're running right now, that's 8, 11, 14 basic lands. I would probably up the count by 2 or 3 just for your land fetches. Your Kadama's Reach, your Cultivate, that kind of stuff, because it goes for basics and you want to have a little bit more on it.
Yep, and I did that as well. I threw in, I think, 1 more swamp and 1 more plains to kind of even that curve out for the ramp I threw in the deck.
I did like to see Exotic Orchard in the deck.
Oh, I loved it, along with Reflecting Pool.
In a 3-color deck, Exotic Orchard is almost always just a dual land. Now, it's a random dual land, and you can't fetch it, but like it almost always makes you 2 of the 3 colors you need, if not all 3.
Yep.
So that's good to see. The 2 I would probably add myself, although they're not super cheap, is City of Brass and Mana Confluence.
They're not very expensive.
City of Brass is 6, Mana Confluence is 7.
Yep, they're under the 10. I had Mana Confluence on my list, but not City of Brass for whatever reason.
Because they make any color, so they fix perfectly. And in a deck without a ton of fixing, because there's no Chromatic Lantern in this deck, we can just say that ahead of time.
And there's no Urborg.
Because they're both well beyond the price range at this point. Chromatic Lantern's over almost 14. Urborg's 25.
Almost 25.
Yeah, that card keeps going up in price. Yeah. What is wrong? I don't understand it.
They're just good. So anyway, I like City of Brass and Mana Confluence. Murmuring Bosk is
the one that's a Tree Folk check one?
It's a Tree Folk check one, but I mean, even if you... And there's a good chance you'll have a Tree Folk in hand, so it comes into play untapped. But even if it comes into play tapped, it still makes all 3 of the colors you need.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a Forest subtype, which we'll get to later, so that means it's fetchable with some cards.
And it was in last year's pre-con. I think it was in the 2016 Commander deck.
It was in the 2017, and the 2017 version is under $1, and the From the Vault foil is under $2.
Wow.
Even better. Go for the foil.
It is. It's pretty. I played one last night.
Yeah, and I would for sure put that in the deck. But even without even if it didn't have the tree, like reveal a Tree Folk and it comes into play untapped, even if it came into play tapped every time, for a tri-land that has a Forest subtype, that's worth it.
Yeah.
And in this case, there's a good chance it wouldn't come into play tapped. So I think Sungrass Prairie is one of the Odyssey filter lands. It's the only one of the filters because they're ally colors that works in this deck, but it doesn't come into play tapped and it's $1. So I would probably maybe find a slot for that as well. Those are the big things in the lands that jumped out at me. I kind of agree with most of your changes for the most part.
Yeah, there's not much. I know there's Concealed Courtyard and Blooming Marsh in here, which I mean, they're pretty much guild gate unless you get them on turn 1 or 2.
I would say, given a choice, I would also run a pain land or a check land before those. This isn't a fast deck. Like
No.
you're not trying to race out to the win. So
It can be, though. If you're on curve, you hit Doran
Sure.
and just all of a sudden, bam, 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 take someone out immediately.
Oh yeah.
But I feel like more often than not, you're okay with your land coming into play tapped on turn 1 or 2 versus coming into play tapped on turn 5.
Yep.
All right. How about sorceries?
Sorceries. Magic. Pew, 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 pew.
There's not a lot of pew pew in a Abzan deck.
So like boom.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
So let's just go on the list here. It's a little bit more interesting than going over every individual land. We could just go over all the sorceries in the deck.
Yep.
First one is Cultivate, and we might as well put a / Kodama's Reach here because it's pretty much the same card 99.9% of the time. And yeah, I would run, if I'm playing green, I'm probably running both of them.
Yep, no hesitation. They would both be slotted in immediately.
You can grab the fixing with them. You get your landfall for the next turn. It's a nice thing to play on turn 3.
Worst comes to worst, you miss a land drop on turn 3. You cast that. You put one into play tapped, and then put one
Right.
into
Yeah.
play for your land drop.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no regrets when I see these two cards. Even late in the game, it doesn't bug me to pull a Cultivator Kodama's Reach.
Never.
So, so the next one I'm curious about, Farseek.
I kept it in, but I
Okay.
like ramping. So
I like it too, but only if you have the fetchable shocks or dual type cards such as your Canopy Vista, whatever else, not your Murmuring Boss.
you're cycling lands.
Yep.
Yep, something that you can hit a dual land to bring into play.
That would be my comment as well. So for those, let's just mention the difference with Farseek. Farseek is 2 mana, and you can search up not a forest. And put it into
I
play,
love how it's
basically.
just not. They should just put that on there,
Right.
not a forest.
But it doesn't say basic. So if you have a fetchable land, which now right now the deck as it was printed to us, it doesn't have any fetchable lands, or doesn't
No.
have any fetchable dual lands.
Yes.
Right.
So that makes sense. But if you add even just Murmuring Bosk, or the cycling dual lands that are relatively cheap too.
Yep.
So once you start adding things that you can fetch that have dual land types, Farseek gets better. But if you don't have those, I don't know. I would probably just run something like Nature's Lore because it comes
Floating
into play
vegetables,
untapped.
maybe.
Yeah. Well, even
Yeah.
at the same CMC, I would say if you have no fetchers,
Oh yeah, no Nature's
run.
Lore,
If
then.
you have no fetchable lands at the same CMC, I would probably run Nature's Lore because the land doesn't come into play tapped. So Farseek, I would keep in if you're going to add fetchable lands, and if
Yep.
you're not, then I would maybe swap it out with something like Nature's Lore because that's also a dollar card, and it's not a huge deal either way. I don't think. But
No. And it also can't say not a forest because it doesn't say waste.
that's true.
It doesn't say waste on the card, so you can't fetch a waste with Farseek.
That was before. They should have rata that and just into not a forest.
You can enter the designer search
There
and
you
just
go, the
redo
great
Farseek.
designer search.
I'll hit Tom Ross up on Twitter and be like, hey Tom Ross, you should errata this card for us.
Just for us, nobody else.
Next is Harmonize.
Yep. 2 colorless, 2 green, draw 3 cards. Your basic best green draw spell, in my opinion.
For 4 mana.
For 4 mana, and particularly in this deck
Yes.
where you can't run
Risk
Rishkar's
cards.
Expertise. And really you can't run any of the other green draw spells either because most of them are based on either a creature, its power, or on, I guess, dealing damage. You can run like Hunter's Insight or Hunter's Prowess, but Soul's Majesty isn't an option and just Rishkar's Expertise.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was looking through that too. Going through the deck, I'm like, okay, we're building it off of toughness. And then I'm like, wait, that really limits our card draw spells.
Yes,
Yes,
it
Because
does.
then
For sure.
you're stuck into mainly your black card draw
Yep.
spells and maybe 2 green card draw spells at the most.
And the black spells almost always deal you damage, and there's no life gain in this deck either.
Yep.
So that's worth remembering. Yeah, Harmonize, I would for sure run that in this deck, absolutely. Next, Merciless Eviction. I would run it for
Yeah.
sure.
I wouldn't even hesitate.
Modular, it exiles, it does everything. It's 6. I mean, at 6 mana, that's not.
You can get there in this deck, though.
I'd prefer
I
it to
can-
be 5 or 4.
I can actually
but
talk about this card due to the game that I played last night in my 5-player pod against 2 Aloro decks, having all the Planeswalkers in play, and telling them, you need to beat me now or I'm going to win next turn. And then the one guy tutors, and he's looking and looking and looking. I'm like, do you have a Merciless Eviction in there? No, what does that do? And I told him, he's like,
oh,
I'm like, yeah, that would just like completely ruin my day, and I would just be dead right then and
yeah.
there.
Yep.
I mean, it's not quite austere command, but it does hit planeswalkers.
Yep.
And it's
It's
fantastic.
exile.
Yeah, and it's exile, right? That makes a huge difference sometimes too. So yes, that's a great call. Mulvani Acid Moss.
I took it out. I do not like that card.
What is it? It's 4 mana.
It's 4 mana, destroy target
Land.
Target land.
And then search your library for a forest card and put the card into play tapped.
I guess it maybe depends on your meta. I feel like since this is a budget deck, I don't know if you're going to be facing off against Cabal Coffers and
No.
Gaia's Cradles very often,
Nope.
where you need to have your land your destruction stapled onto a spell.
And at 4 CMC, I'd rather run Explosive Vegetation and get 2
Yeah.
lands out of the deal.
I swapped it for Sky Shroud Claim. 4 mana, 2 forests, untap, and there's no double green in the casting cost, unlike Acid Moss.
Yes.
So it's going to
Yep.
be easier to cast in this 3-color
Yeah,
deck.
Sky Shroud Claim or Exploding Vegetables, they're both the same CMC.
Yep.
Exact same with 3 colorless and 1 green. One that goes for strictly forest, the other one goes for any basics.
But it goes for, in terms of claim, it goes for forest, not basic forest. So you can grab, if you have
Fetchable
fetchable
duels.
you can grab them with
Yep.
Sky Shroud Claim. So I would probably run one of those two as well. We were just talking about like the need to have more land destruction in decks. So I hate to say like don't run this because it's a perfectly serviceable
Yeah.
card. But I don't think this deck is the kind of deck that's going to be worried too much about dealing with super scary lands. I mean, maybe it is, and if that's the case, it's a perfectly valid card.
My guess is by looking over this deck list, unless he's just building it for his friend to play with each other, there's probably not a big meta of needing to destroy lands.
Yeah, I don't think I would agree. And you're definitely not going to be using it in that environment to like deprive someone of mana on turn 4, which is what the if you're playing more competitively, well, at turn 4 you're going to get ahead of land and take out one of theirs.
Yep.
That's a legitimate play, but I don't think that's how this is going to be played. So
Yeah, I see no reason for it.
next up, Route.
I am not a fan of this card in this deck.
It's fine. Route's a fine card.
It's a good card. I think 3 colors, 5 mana or 7 mana is a lot.
I think Route is a good card, and I think Austere Command is $3 now.
That's exactly what I have on my notes. Is I just recently bought one of the new Austere commands, and actually it cost me $4. Is what
Okay.
it was at. But the ability to blow up so many different things.
$4 Austere Commands all day long in every white deck. It is such a
every
good
time I
card.
see them at the shop, I'm
Buy
gonna
'em.
pick one
Yeah,
up. At
yeah.
$4, they're gonna go up in price like the rest of them did, and
Yeah, no,
it'd be nice to have extras.
Route is legit. There's nothing wrong with Route. It's fine.
No.
It can be instant speed. That's nice.
Right.
But man, Austere Command is just so good.
See, and the only downfall I see to playing Route or even too many board wipes in a deck like this that aren't specific towards your play style is that a lot of your creatures are so mana intensive
Right.
that if you wrath the board continuously or at the wrong time, it's going to take you forever to rebuild, whereas everyone else can rebuild faster than you.
Yeah, this isn't a deck that bounces back quickly either. I don't
No, it is not.
The last sorcery is Wave of Reckoning, and that's probably an obscure enough card that it's worth mentioning what it does.
Yep. Each creature deals damage to itself equal to its power for 4 colorless and 1 white.
So in a deck where every creature has less power than toughness,
It's worth it.
it's worth. I mean, it's probably there's been enough times I've seen this cast in a Doran deck where it's entirely a one-sided board wipe. Like every creature but the Doran player's creatures die.
Yep. It's worth mentioning that there are other ones like that. I can't think of the names off the top of my head. I didn't look them up, but there's a few of them that do the same thing. Like the creatures deal damage to themselves equal to their power, while you're running all these guys with weak power but huge butts, so it does nothing to your board, but it'll wrath out other people's boards.
Yep.
There's also stuff like Dusk to Dawn from Amonkhet that destroys all creatures with power 3 or less. Excuse me, all creatures with power 3 or greater. And in this case, that's none of your creatures, for the most part. So like that's like also one-sided board wipe, and it has the Aftermath ability, which is the Dawn side, to bring back all creatures with power 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So after you board wipe, 4 turns later when someone else does something, you have the option to then bring back a good chunk of your beaters from your graveyard to your hand.
Oh, yeah.
So that's one I would consider in there as well. There's also Retribution of the Meek, which is an old reserve list card. So it's like $7. It's not crazy for being on the reserve list, but it's not nothing. And that destroys all creatures with power 4 or greater. And that's pretty solid in Doran decks too. But at this point, Wave of Reckoning, Austere Command, Merciless Eviction, and you're already talking 3 board wipes right there. Do you need a 4th or a 5th with Dust to Dawn and Retribution of the Meek? Maybe, but
If anything, I would think about Decree of Pain, just because of
sure,
the
just to
lack
draw
of
a ton.
card draw.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
And worst comes to worst, you cycle it, wipe out a whole bunch of little guys, and it ain't gonna affect any
Right,
of
doesn't
yours.
touch you at all. Yeah, that's a good call too. How about instant spells?
So he originally had 10 in his deck.
Yep.
The first one being Abzan Charm.
Which I like. Absent Charm is another card draw spell in these colors that can help you out if need be.
Draw 2 cards and does it
Lose 2 life.
lose 2 life.
Yep.
And it's 3 mana, which isn't nothing.
But
But
it also gives you other options with it too. So if you don't need it for the card draw at the time, you can use it to exile a creature with power 3 or greater, or distribute 2+1/+1 counters among 1 or more target creatures.
yeah, that's solid. Like
Yeah.
like I don't know if I would run it necessarily, but I'm not going to tell you not to run it. It's a perfectly good card.
Right. It's a little harder to cast than something like Read the Bones or Sign
Right.
of Blood, but it's modular, and we are definitely a fan of that here at Commander Central.
For sure. Okay, next on the instant list, we have Anguish Unmaking, which is just a great removal spell.
Auto include.
There's not a lot of these instant spells are ones I would probably run because the next
Yep.
one, Beast Within. Beast Within is great. I mean,
Gotta run
hits,
Beast.
hits any target. It's like Anguish Unmaking. Just the versatility is fantastic. They're relatively cheap. They will deal with things that are going to screw you over. Those are both fantastic cards. How about Evolution Charm? That's our 4th one.
See, I was torn on this one. I mean, I love the instant speed
Ramp.
land tutor.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, that looks awesome, but the rest of it, not so much.
I took it out kind of with the same thought of Chris, the put the land in the hand at instant speed. I mean, it helps you set up your next turn if you don't have any lands in hand.
Yep.
But that's about all that card is good for, so I kind of stacked my version of this deck heavy with the sorcery speed ramp spells like your Explosive Veggies, Skyshroud Claims, and I replaced this with Enlightened Tutor.
Oh.
Okay, I could go that
Is
route.
that under 10 now?
It is. Let
they're
me
all,
look
they're
here.
all right around like the 950
Okay.
mark.
I made a fancy little spreadsheet.
Nice. That is dedication.
Yeah, I know. I just looked up Enlightened Tutor earlier too, because I'm like, I wonder if we could run that in here.
It is. It's at the $10 maximum.
All right.
The Eternal Masters one is like $9.99.
Yep.
So I said, hey, it's under 10.
It's an option.
Yep.
Along with having, if you did run an Enlightened Tutor, it allows you to search up certain things,
Yeah.
that you could need.
Right.
I like Evolution. I think it's neat because it's a card you don't see very much. I think there's also maybe a bit of a reason you don't see it very much. I just don't know if it quite gets you there.
The biggest thing I can say is it's more of a trick card, which is not that great in a multiplayer format, whereas it is wonderful in like 1v1 formats or something like that.
Right. Well, we might as well hit all 3 abilities. You can search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Or you can return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or target creature gains flying until end of turn. So, I mean, technically you could swing through with a flyer that no one's ready for, or bounce a creature back to recast it. It's fine. I just don't know if it quite is strong enough.
Right. And another thing I really didn't like about this card in this deck is the original list, he's running 14 basics. And if
Okay.
you take all the other ramp spells he has in his deck, it knocks it down to about 7 basics maybe left in the deck if he were not to cast
including
this.
your draws and stuff like
Right,
that.
not including your draws or your normal plays, thinking you would draw this late game.
Sure.
Where if, like we kind of said earlier, if you draw a Skyshroud Claim or a Exploding Veggies late game and you kind of retweak your land base, that's not going to be a fail to find. You're going to get 2 basics or up to 2 basics.
Yep.
Usually every time.
And the instant speed also makes more sense in a deck where you're holding mana free to do things. I don't know how often this deck is holding mana free, so like yes, you get the land at the end of your turn at instant speed, end of someone's turn, but I don't know what you're saving your mana for anyway. So it's we said it before. I said it before. It's fine.
Yep.
Next 2, might as well do together: Mortify and Putrefy.
Both
Yeah.
phenomenal.
They're excellent.
Yep. They both destroy creatures. One destroys an artifact, and one destroys an enchantment.
And also, Putrefy has a can't be regenerated clause tacked onto it for what that's worth.
It does. Whereas Mortify doesn't.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And they're kind of a broken cycle out of original Ravnica. I was surprised they both didn't have the anti-regeneration clause just to mirror each other, but only one does.
Maybe it has something to do with Putrefy being green, and green is usually a regeneration color, so it's
Yeah,
like
maybe.
no to regeneration.
But black has plenty of anti-regeneration stuff too, and since Mortify's black-white, I think it could have easily been on there. But
True.
It doesn't matter 99% of the time. So
Right.
You don't see that much in Commander anymore.
you do not. All right, next we have Root Grapple. 5 mana is a lot.
I have to include this card. He wants to go Tree Folk, and this is Tribal Tree Folk.
It is that-
sorcery or instant, so you got to do it.
I will never tell someone not to run something on theme.
Right. And I mean, you're drawing the card because of the Tree Folk. If you control a Tree Folk, which he has quite a few in the deck, I cut it though.
Destroy target.
Shame.
Destroy target non-creature permanent. If you control a Tree Folk, draw a card, and it's 4 and a green.
Yep.
Instant speed, and it's a Tree Folk tribal. Although, is there anything in this deck that like gets you a Tree Folk or cares? I guess if you're on Murmuring Boss, you can reveal it as a Tree Folk.
Yep.
I don't know what else really
There's
matters.
a couple champions in here.
Yeah, that's true.
But
So it's
I totally got your back.
All right.
Don't listen
All
to
right.
these
All
guys.
right.
This is,
No, that's
we're
fair.
going tribal with this. I love me some
that's a
tribal
perfectly
decks.
a fair
yeah,
reason to
no,
run it.
and I agree. I replaced it with Vraska's Contempt.
Okay.
The exile and the life gain for less mana is just something I prefer over destroying a non-creature permanent. So I mean, it
Okay.
does hit a land, which is cool, but exile is better than destroy.
I think the big thing that's drawing me to it, even though it's cost more, is the draw card. Because of the restrictions of this deck, it's costing us, we can't jam all the good green draw spells
Right.
in here.
Right.
So we're restricted on what we can use for draw spells.
And wow, was that a challenge?
Yeah.
That was horrible for me.
Next we have Selesnya Charm. This one I don't think makes the cut.
No,
It
I-
just doesn't do enough.
I put this on the chopping block right away.
And I don't think any of the modes really make the cut. I mean, I guess exile target creature with power 5 or greater is useful sometimes, but man, target creature gets +2/+2 and trample is fine, but it's in a multiplayer game, it's not as strong as it is 1v1.
No, and making the night token
Tonight is largely
definitely
irrelevant.
not helping him out.
Again, it's not like it's a terrible card, it just doesn't do enough to warrant a slot.
And I'm assuming he's using it for the removal.
Yeah, I would
I mean,
guess most of the time.
If someone drops an Ur Dragon, you can exile it right away. That's pretty cool for 2 mana.
The +2/+2 trample on like a Doran who's swinging for 5 damage suddenly
Ugh.
becomes 7. That's
Right.
not nothing. But I think there are better ways to do that. And I will mention those 2 cards right now. 2 cards I would consider here are Bar the Door, which is an instant speed. Creatures you control get +0/+4 until end of turn, and it's like 10 cents.
Yep.
And there's Solidarity. Creatures you control get +0/+5 until end of turn, and it's also like 10 cents. So if you've got 3 or 4 creatures and you're swinging at somebody and they're like, oh, okay, well, it's Doran and it's this and that, I'll just take the 12 damage. If you drop Solidarity, there's somebody taking 32 damage instead of 12 damage. Like, you can legitimately just kill people with those 2 cards.
Yeah, thinking of that right now, I'm thinking there is a 1 mana white instant that gives a creature +7/+7.
Righteousness.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay.
But my thought about Righteousness was it's 1 creature, and I guess maybe on Doran it would be enough to finish somebody off.
Yep.
Whereas Bar the Door and Solidarity would be enough to kill just pretty often. That's going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
So those would be useful to have. And defensively, the same way, someone's swinging at you and they're like doing the math. Okay, Doran, I'll take 5 from him blocking. I'll take 8 from this other thing. I'll be fine. And then you drop one of those, and all their creatures are dead for the crackback.
Yep.
So I think they're relatively versatile, and they function as kind of like an overrun.
I would rather run overrun personally.
Even though because you're not really losing anything. Overwhelming Stampede wouldn't be great because
No.
it buffs the creature based on the most toughness you have. But Overrun +3/+3 and Trample for 5 mana is perfectly
Yep.
legitimate
Just because
too.
you're getting 3 extra toughness and you're getting trample on all your creatures at the same time.
We had a couple more in here. We had Tower Defense.
Yep.
And
+0/+5 till end of turn. Creatures. So it's all creatures.
Yes. And they get reach as well.
Yep.
So it's a good defensive spell, and it can also be used for an Alpha Strike.
Yep.
I think that's worth leaving in the deck.
I definitely did.
And last is Utter End, which is another great spell.
you can't pass up on those
No.
spells.
That was one of the reasons I thought maybe I wouldn't run Root Grapple, is there's a lot of good removal in this deck already. Putrefy, Mortify, Utter End, Anguish and Making, Beast Within. Like, you've got a lot of solid target removal already in this deck.
Oh yeah.
So I think you could probably leave Root Grapple off and not miss a beat.
Okay. I understand that route.
Artifacts. We'll do creatures last. We'll do artifacts next.
Okay. I guess I'll start this. Bow of Nylea. So many modes on this.
So many modes, but I'm not sure they're that relevant.
I'm
Like
guessing,
they're fine. They're all fine. Putting creatures in the bottom of your library is really useful, but there's not a lot of ways to get creatures necessarily. And even if you
No.
throw one tutor in, I still don't think it's
If
worth
I
it.
had to guess why it's in here, it's because of the Death Touch ability.
Death Touch
That's
is useful.
most
when they
likely
attack.
why
But your
it's in
creatures
here.
are swinging, so I mean, like most of them are swinging for 5 or 6 or 7 as it is. That's functionally Death Touch in most cases.
Mhm.
True. I would almost over this. I would almost run Whip of Erebos if I were to choose. If I had to swap it out artifact for artifact, just for the life gain.
The life gain and the ability on Whip is both things are probably more relevant than Death Touch and the Nightly abilities.
Yep.
I would agree with that. Commander Sphere.
Yeah,
Good.
easy include, especially in a 3-color deck. I went to
3-color deck, it's always good.
immediately in there, especially with not being able to put a chromatic lantern in here.
Yeah.
This is your best option.
And late game, you can crack it. One thing I love about Commander Sphere too is you can sacrifice it after you tap it.
Yep.
Like
Float
you-
the mana,
yeah.
sack it. I've done that numerous times. I'm gonna float a white, sack it. Come on, swords to plowshares,
Right.
swords to plowshares.
Felwar Stone.
Keep it.
The only comment I would make about it, Felwar Stone is a really, really good card, but you're playing green, and I feel like as long as you're not running every single 2-drop green ramp spell, I think I'd prefer to run one of those over Felwar Stone, just because it's tougher to destroy. The odds of someone destroying the land you get is way lower than someone destroying your Felwar Stone with just an errant Vandal Blast or Shatterstorm or something.
Okay, then maybe if we're just gonna swap them out one for like an artifact for an artifact, run Mindstone then,
Sure, yeah.
because then you can sack it to draw a card if need be.
Mhm.
The 3 signets, Golgari Signet, Orzhov Signet, and Selesnya Signet.
All
Yep.
good.
Auto include. I pretty much every time I build a deck, it's auto include of the signet for the colors.
And I can't think my
Sigarda
Sigarda
deck.
deck that's running no artifacts is not running a signet, and I think that's it. I mean, maybe not in a 5-color deck where you'd have 10 of them.
Yeah, if I know I've built a few 5-color decks. If everyone ever goes that route, you go off of what your most colors are, and that's where you put your
Yeah.
signets. You don't try to jam them all in there.
But they're fantastic, and even though they're 2-drops, and I made the comment about Felwar Stone, I'd run the land ramp spell ahead of time, I would still probably run signets even in
Yeah.
a green deck.
The signets keep you on curve, can keep you within your colors
Yep.
easier.
Lightning Greaves.
I
That's
like
a
it.
bad card. Don't play it.
Nobody should run Lightning Greaves. Lightning
No.
Greaves. Lightning Greaves wins games.
Yes.
I mean, and
Especially
there-
Lightning Greaves on turn 2 wins games.
yeah.
Yes.
And in this particular deck where there's not much in the way of stuff targeting your own creatures, Shroud isn't even a downside. Like, there are some situations where Shroud can screw you over, and I've had it screw me over before, my own Shroud. This deck isn't one of them. They're like, you're never going to encounter a situation where you care.
No, this is strictly protecting Doran.
Yeah.
That's all it's doing. The haste is nice, but you just want Doran on the field
Yep.
constantly.
Slagworm Armor.
Oh, I love this card and I hate this card at the same time.
I mean, it's so efficient in this deck.
Yeah, and that's why I love this card. And
Yeah.
I hate this card because I've had it equipped on and smacked into my face
Yep.
a few times.
It is not flashy at all, but it's just so efficient.
Gets the job done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, literally on turn 4, you suit up Doran. He's a 0/11.
Right.
Just going
Yeah.
raw
Yeah.
at you.
Soul Ring. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Soul Ring.
Why do they keep reprinting this card? It is seriously.
I think we just need to accept the fact that they're never going to ban Soul Ring at this point.
They should ban it and then ban Cyclonic Rift right after it.
Here you go, Chris.
Right.
Buy them all out. Buy every Soul Ring and then just jack the price up to like $40 a piece.
I have like 20 of them. I don't need any more.
Yeah, I have more Soul Rings than I will ever use
Yeah.
as well.
I hand them out to people. It's like, oh, you don't have a Soul Ring in the deck? Here.
And it's still like a $3 card.
It
It's
is.
not cheap.
I feel like Oprah. Everyone wins.
Everyone gets a
You
Soul
get
Ring.
a Soul Ring. You get a Soul Ring. Everybody gets a Soul Ring.
Warmonger's Chariot is next on the artifact list.
Okay, now this is where I'm getting torn. Now there's this one, there is an enchantment, and there's a creature that do this, and they all revolve around the defender.
Yep.
I personally cut all 3 of them. Because I
As
think it's too risky to play the defender game if these cards get removed and you cannot recur them, then you're shafted with defender creatures that can't do anything.
I did the same thing. I looked at your deck and I found 8 creatures with Defender. And you had 3 cards and 3 other cards in your deck that turn Defender off. And if you don't find those, they get destroyed or exiled. Your game plan for 8 of your creatures is gone. You can't attack with them. You can't do anything. So
Now,
we'll get into this more when we get to the creatures, but I scrapped the entire defender lineup out of the deck. All the creatures, all the spells that had to deal with it.
we will debate this later.
Well, this is part of the reason I left creatures
It's on
for
like
last.
Donkey Kong.
Right, all right. That was my initial thought, was to pull the defenders. The only reason I hesitated was because a lot of them are mana dorks.
That's where I was gonna get on like Donkey Kong when we got around
And I'm like,
to it.
man, the fact that you can tap this for mana or just leave it there and people have to swing into it for like 4 damage, that makes sense. Like, I can see how that's a pain in the butt to deal with. And then when you have Doran out and someone's like, okay, well, or you have like one of your those tree folk that are like the 0/13s. And someone's like, okay, he's had a big blocker, but who cares? You drop the chariot or you drop one of the other things that gives it the ability to attack. Someone who's assumed they were not going to get hit because all you had was this 0/13 plant in play, suddenly was taking 13 to the grill. So I think that's cool. I don't know if it's consistent enough to justify running anyway.
Yes, I can see when we get around to it. I'm just gonna say it now. The enchantments with assault formation, I can definitely see leaving that one in for sure.
Because assault formation is a backup Doran.
Yes.
Yep.
So that's totally legit.
So you still have your option of going that route.
Yeah. I think even leaving the defenders in, I'm not sure Warmonger's Chariot brings enough to the table to use a slot.
Right.
Next, Worn Power Stone. I like Worn Power Stone, but my same comment here is I would make about Fellwar Stone. I would rather just run a green ramp spell in that slot. It's just gonna it's not gonna go away, whereas Worn Power Stone is. At some point, someone will probably blow up artifacts.
Yeah, I get that logic. I kept it in just because it is a nice mana rock.
Yep.
And in your case, maybe you were assuming veggies and Skyshard Claim were both taken, or were both being used already.
Yep.
And that's fine if that's the case. If you're running all the green ramp spells that matter, then this is there. But if you're not, if there's one green ramp spell that isn't being used, like one of the good 7 or 8 ones, I would run all of those over Worn Power Stone in a green deck.
Agreed. You can't argue that at all.
And those are cheap. I mean, Skyshard Claim is $2, and Explosive Vegetation is $1. And I think Worn Power Stone is probably more than 2 right now.
The
43 cents.
43 cents, according to Tapped Out.
Because it was in the
It was in Commander this
yeah,
year.
that's right. All right.
One artifact that I put in, I put the green-white talisman.
Oh, sure, that makes sense.
Because it can tap for a colorless, and it's a pain land, essentially. Especially because Brushland is on that price range cusp of the $10.
Just not quite making
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
the lowest price Brushland is 11, so I put it in my list, even though it was over the 10. But the talisman does the same thing for 2 mana.
Now, what do you guys think about the new dragon ones that they came out with in the cons block?
The monuments?
I've been toying around with them lately. I like the ability of late game turning it into a flying beater if need be.
I would run them all over Manolith.
Oh, no. That's a whole nother story there.
Didn't you write an article about that?
I did write an article about that.
And I still see it get played, and I always turn people, I'm like, there's an EDH Rec article out there that you should read about this card.
What you need to do is print a bunch of them.
I should
and then
do
just
that.
hand it out. Oh, you played a Manolith? Here's why you shouldn't. Oh, you
Or
played
cancel.
cancel? Here's why you shouldn't.
That is great. I'm going to do that. That comes across awfully smug and
That's why you
condescending.
have us do it and not you.
That's true. That's true. There you go. It's like, oh, who knows?
Hey, Chris, that guy's playing cancel. You got those articles with you? Yeah, here you go.
That would be awesome. All right.
I don't want to see that in your deck next week.
We'll do that at some point and report back on it here. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, the talismans are really, really, really good cards too.
And that is the only one you can run in the deck. And it's
Sure.
And it's less than $1. So that's why I threw it in there.
All right. Anything else in artifacts?
I'm sure there's some equipment. I didn't go through all the equipment, but there's probably some good equipment.
There's a couple.
that
Nothing
could-
as good as Flagworm armor, but there's a couple decent pieces.
Yeah. That are budget friendly. I mean, I can
Yes.
think of some expensive ones that would be really nice. in
Right.
there,
Oh,
but
yeah.
Enchantments.
Yeah, we got the assault formation, as I was saying.
Yep.
For those of you that don't know, this is pretty much how the deck's going to function properly. Each creature you control assigns its combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. And then for a green, target creature with defender can attack this turn as though it didn't have defender. And then 2 colorless and a green. Oh, it disappeared on me. What happened?
2 colorless and a green. Creatures you control get +0/+1 until end of turn.
So basically, you
sorry
can
for my
buff.
outburst there.
You're okay. It's
It's just
tapped
like
out. not
literally
you.
like it just disappeared off my screen.
So that's donuts, right? It goes straight to the ass.
Yeah.
That for 3 mana, straight to the butt.
It's
+0/+1.
the last month of my life.
And the more donuts, right? And the more donuts you eat, the bigger they get.
That's why I don't eat sweets.
So, I mean, we kind of started this debate. this is a very key piece in this deck. I mean, without this, you are not doing much.
I think this is just straight up auto include because you were playing around Doran.
Yep.
I would
So
agree.
I agree.
Any other option you have to do it, put it in there.
Even if you have no defenders, I would run this.
I agree that it is an auto include, yet I took it out.
Oh, really?
I took it out because overall I looked at his deck and I said, he started with like 30 creatures in the deck, which is
A good amount.
a good amount. I don't like playing creature heavy decks. It's not my
Sure.
style. So I really played to the fact of I want to protect my board state or make it to the end game where I can then drop these fatties and just swing away. If I can outlast everybody and get it down to me and another player, or me and two other players, and have more resources than they do, that's how I built this deck.
Okay.
That
And
makes sense.
Especially because, I would have included Assault Formation if Asceticism and Privileged Position weren't over $10. If you had ways to protect these enchantments
Right.
from not being targeted with removal, then yeah, it's an include. But without Asceticism or Privileged Position or any of those type of cards, because they're over the budget constraint, it was too chancy for me.
Okay. I would still run it, but I see what you're saying there.
Right.
And see, I can't cut it because then it comes down to the thing that I've mentioned before about building your deck solely around your
Yeah.
commander then. And you don't have another option then if you
Right.
don't have it in there.
Or someone steals your commander. In this
Yeah.
case, I mean, you need that. Although I guess in that case, Doran's ability still works with your creatures. But
Yep.
all right. Next one, we have Growing Rights of Itlimoc.
I have to cut this one. I can think of something that would probably be better in your Frontier Siege over this.
We were talking about last show talking about running more land removal because of cards like this. But I do agree. I feel like this deck, because a lot of the creatures have a relatively high CMC, and you need to have 4 in play simultaneously to flip it. That's kind of maybe a tall order sometimes.
Not to mention when it does flip, it's a Gaia's Cradle, so it relies on how many creatures you have. And it's not like you're playing a deck that's pumping out 30 tokens, so you have 30 mana there.
Right.
It might only create 2 mana for you, so why not just play the Frontier Siege that's always pumping out, 2-4 mana every turn.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree with that.
I kept it.
You got Max
So-
the Contrarian.
So here's my argument.
We always disagree
We
on
do.
this stuff.
This is why this
Always.
show is awesome.
All right.
So
Yeah.
here's my argument. You kept all the defenders because a lot of them were mana dorks based on how many creatures with defender you have.
Kind of,
Yes.
yes.
That's the same argument for growing rights. If you don't have more than one creature with defender, you're only getting 1 mana. If you
Sure.
if you get
True.
growing rights to flip, you're still tapping it for a green no matter what. If you have 2 creatures out, you're getting 2 green. If that's how I played with it. And I would rather be able to get more better creatures out than the defenders and be able to flip growing rights than worry about making sure I get all my defenders out so that one defender taps for 8 mana.
Well, this definitely isn't like in my Glissa. Like, if I put Growing Rights in my Glissa deck, that would be terrible because
Yes.
there's only 18 creatures in the deck. It's just never, it's going to be really difficult to flip in the first place. And even if it does, it's not going to be busted like you want. I think in this deck, it's runnable.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not as amazing as it is in a token deck.
No. Or a smaller
Or an
creature.
elf deck.
Or an elf
something like
deck.
that,
or
a green, blue
Right.
merfolk, something like that.
See, I guess another reason I cut it is because I did cut down the creatures.
So did I.
So I don't have quite that many creatures, so it wasn't worth it to stick around when I could have something
Sure.
that's continuously giving me the same amount of mana every turn.
I kept this. My other reason I kept this over the defenders and anything else is because both Urborg and Cabal Coffers were out of the price range. So an abusive mana producer, this is really all we have.
Next up, we have, speaking of abusive mana producers, we have Mirari's Wake, which is just
Great.
great.
Yeah.
You need to remove it or bad things happen.
There have been times where I've jammed Mirari's Wake out just to draw out the hate, so
Yeah.
I can jam my worst card afterwards.
I have a plan. I don't need the mana right now, but if I play Mirari's Wake, someone's going to remove it.
Yep.
Yep.
Make them waste it, especially when I'm playing my Ural deck. It's like, okay, if I play this Mirari's Wake, then I can jam either the Sphere of Safety or the
Sure.
Sigil of the Sigil of the Empty Throne afterwards. You know,
If
Yeah.
no
and-
one counterspelled that Mirari's Wake, that means no one has a counterspell because
Yep.
they wouldn't have let me do that otherwise.
And
Yeah.
if they don't, then you're like, okay, well now I got to rethink how I'm going to do everything
Right,
again.
right. Oh, I someone plays Mirari's Wake and they use their whole turn for it. They're like, okay, I'll spend 5, play it, and And then you're like looking around going, somebody needs to remove that because when it comes back around, he's got 7 cards in hand and will have access to 12 mana. I'm like, oh no, on turn 6 or something like,
Yep.
oh no.
Stop looking at me.
Right, exactly. Phyrexian Arena.
Probably the best card draw spell
Possible.
can't
I
necessarily
love
permanent.
I understand the argument that I've seen made where in a really competitive meta, it's not that great because it takes a full turn to work and you'd rather just draw 4 cards or 3 cards off of Ambition's cost or something and be done with it. But
Even in 1v1 tournaments, I see people playing this.
yeah,
Because especially in 1v1, are you going to really waste a removal on that versus just killing your opponent?
and this deck isn't going in a turn 6 meta. This deck is going to be in a grindy hour game that's going to go 15 turns, and Phyrexian Arena is
Cards like this, I love, because if people are willing to make the removal option of that, it allows me to jam my Mirari's Wake or my
Sure.
other thing
Yep.
that's going to actually benefit me, just as good. I mean, not quite as good, but as good.
there aren't any tutors in this deck as of yet. We might add a few, but man, I love that turn 2 tutor for a turn 3 Phyrexian Arena. Is one of my favorite things to go get right away.
I have totally turn 1 Vampire
Turn 1
tutored
Vampire into
for it.
Phyrexian Arena. Absolutely.
If it's in my hand, I'm doing nothing on turn 1. It's just like, Vampiric Tutor. We'll go get that
Yep.
and get set up for turn 3 then.
And lastly, we have Zendikar Resurgent. 7 mana is a lot.
That's one of the things that really hurts me.
It's a draw spell, though.
It is, but that's whenever you cast a creature spell. And going into what I said earlier, I cut a few of the creatures out, so it you removes your options of it. And by turn 7, it's just
I always debate taking it out of my my Recce deck because there are those games where I draw it and I'm like, I don't want I can't cast it right now because I only have 8 mana. I need to do other more important things, and it doesn't work. Then there are those games where like I cast it on turn 7 because I have nothing else going on, and it enables everything else because next turn I play a creature and draw 2 cards off it, and I have twice as much mana, and one of those cards is a creature which draws me 2 more, and it refills my hand and gives me all the gas in the world. So like for every time it doesn't work, there's a time where it's just ridiculously busted.
yeah, it does double mana too, but it's just like you're saying, it's always on my mind like I should
can
play
whiff.
this. Yeah.
It can whiff.
I went through all that, too. I kept it because of the draw capabilities. I mean, I cut the creatures down, too, but I figured I stacked this deck with more ramp, so maybe it's not going to be turn 7. Maybe it's going to be turn 5.
Okay.
So I kept it just because of how abusive it can be.
Makes sense.
I did add 2 other enchantments.
I
I don't
did
know
as
if
well.
you guys did. I added Behind the Scenes.
Of course.
Thank you,
I think we
Adam.
all did.
Behind the scenes is so
Yes.
behind the scenes is not good in any deck
But-
except for Doran, where it's ridiculously powerful.
So Behind the Scenes, for those who don't know, is an enchantment from Shadows over Innistrad. For 2 and 1 black, creatures you control have Skulk, which means they can't be blocked by creatures with higher power. Well,
So most of your creatures just then can't be blocked then for the most part,
right. And then 4 and a white, creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn.
which is obviously
Okay.
used, but
Yeah.
for the most part,
Sometimes when you're doing nothing
Sure.
else, it's just like might as well spend my mana efficiently.
but for the most part, this just means my creatures can't be blocked.
Yep.
Just a disgusting card in this deck, and I would absolutely put it in 100%.
Yes.
I had 2 more actually. One I wasn't sure about. Death Reap Ritual I was kind of on the fence for. That's 2 green and a black, and it's draw a card at the end of any turn where a creature died. So it is 4 mana, and unlike Phyrexian Arena, it's not consistent. Arena, you're going to get a card on your upkeep every turn. But Death Reap Ritual, I've never regretted playing it in my Glissa deck. And I've seen you guys remove it
Well, of course
desperately.
You want to know why we remove it?
Why
Because
is
everything is
that?
death touch, so it doesn't matter what we do. Something's going to
Yes.
die if we come after you.
But I feel
Yep.
like even there's enough situations where just accidentally someone is going to sacrifice a creature, or someone's going to swing at somebody with 3 things, knowing they can get 2 through, and one of them dies. Or
Yep.
like you don't always draw a card every time around the board, but there are enough times when you draw 2 or 3 because everyone lost a creature on every turn for some reason. There's enough times when like it draws you more cards in Arena.
I could get behind that. It is only a 4 mana.
It's only 4
enchantment
mana.
too,
Right.
So
It's a great card. I didn't include it because I didn't.
you probably just spaced it, didn't you?
Yeah, pretty much.
I saw that little smirk on your face over there.
Now, my last one is obvious coming from me, but I'm curious what your next one is, Max.
Descendant's Path.
Okay. That's 2 and 2
so
green?
Descendants Path is from Avacyn Restored. It's 2 and a green.
2 and a green.
It's an
Okay.
enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card that shares a creature type with a creature you control, you cast it without paying its mana cost. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your library.
So did you stack enough tree folk? Because there's 14 in there right now. Did you add enough more to make it?
I have 21 creatures in my version of this deck,
Okay.
and there are 4 non-tree folk creatures in the entire deck.
Okay.
So, it's going to be a hit or miss card, but when you can drop a tree folk for free, it's definitely worth the 3 mana to try, and you can cut it later.
Yep.
The one I waffled on too, and I said it was the obvious one for me, was Righteous War.
Of course.
Because Doran is black and white, so therefore we went over these numbers in our pet card thing. Doran then becomes immune to, what was it, 16 of the top 20 removal spells on EDH Rec?
Yep.
And he becomes really difficult to block at that point.
Yep.
In addition, there's plenty of black and white creatures in here that also gain some protection, so I don't know if it's quite as great in here as it is maybe an Akalia deck or something, but I bet it is. I bet it's a colossal pain in anyone's butt to deal with when you drop a Righteous War and have Doran out.
And it's just another thing for them to blow up instead of your Phyrexian Arena
Exactly,
or
right.
Mirari's
Yep.
Wake or whatever else.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
There's a nice line to walk where you have threats out that aren't necessarily things that make you, oh my god, I have to kill you. Like Jin-Gitaxias. People just want to kill you then if they can't kill Jin-Gitaxias or something.
That happened to me last night.
Right.
Shout out to Steve.
As soon as he played that card, I immediately was like, okay, it's
I'm
on like
coming at-
Donkey
yeah.
Kong now.
But like stuff like Righteous War or stuff, like those are strong cards that people probably have to deal with, but they're not so strong that they make them want to kill you necessarily.
Yeah.
And that's like a nice, I like that sweet spot there where you play cards that are powerful, but not so powerful that they make people want to kill you.
Correct.
So I had an enchantment pop in my head right now when we were talking. It's 3 mana. I can't remember the name of it, but it creates the 0/1 Eldrazi Scions.
Awakening Zone.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Now, what do you think about something like that? It allows you to sack for colorless mana. Plus, your creatures are going to deal 1 damage no matter what.
That's actually a really interesting take, and it would trigger growing rights quicker.
Right, yeah.
Ha! Thank you. Yeah, point max.
I like it.
Before we move on to creatures, I didn't talk about a couple of my sorceries because I wanted to wait till enchantments because of the mana doublers.
Okay.
I put 2 sorceries in here that are, as I kind of said, I wanted to make this deck last the long game, and I put in kind of 2 alt-win conditions into this deck. My first one is I put a Torment of Hailfire in here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, that's...
For 2 black, and if you have either Mirari's Wake or Resurgent out, or even Growing Rights with 3 or 4 creatures, that's a hefty Torment of Hailfire you're hitting your opponents with.
Yeah.
Even if you only have 5 lands out and you have nothing else going on, or 7 lands, it's Torment for 5. That still hits hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially on turn 7.
Yep.
The second one is Exsanguinate.
Mm-hmm.
I put that in there too because
Everybody runs that in a black deck, though. It's like,
well,
I don't know. It's kind of been a turn off to me lately because everyone seems to have one.
our meta right now is pretty heavy in the black color pie,
Yep.
but there's not a lot of life gain in this deck, and I did put a lot of the black card draw in there, so it's a way to get that life
To
back.
gain life back, yep. So
those
we really didn't talk about the black card draw too much.
No.
Which ones would you guys add? Would you add all 3 of them or
The-
5 of them?
So by 5 of them, I assume you're talking about the 3 small ones, which are Night's Whisper, Sign in Blood, and Read the Bones.
Yep.
And
And then the 4 drops, which are Ambition's Cost and Ancient Craving.
yes.
I don't know. I have a couple in the final deck, and I think when all is said and done here, we're going to try to maybe post 3 deck lists. Maybe we'll each
Yeah.
do a deck list and put it out there.
We'll probably have it up when we post the episode on
So
Monday.
we'll try to, when we post the episode, we'll try to have 3 different variants on this deck list, 1 from each of us.
Looks like I have to make it
So-
completely then.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
All right.
What I did is I took his, copied it to my decks on
Account.
Tapped Out.
Oh, and then
And I
just
edited mine.
modify.
Yeah.
Okay, that
so
makes
if you
it
go into
easier.
his deck, you can copy it onto yours
Okay.
and just make edits.
Yep.
So we'll try to do that. I have the 3 small ones and not any of the big ones in
Okay.
my final version of the deck
Yeah.
list.
See, 'cause I don't think I would run Sign in Blood because of double black.
Right.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't even really think of that. That's a good point.
I stuck with the single black casting cost, so I do have Ambition's Cost, but
Ancient
'Cause I
Cravings.
think I would
Ancient
run all
Cravings,
4,
yeah.
the other 4 of them.
Sure, that's
but
legit.
cut Sign in Blood.
and the one other one, and it's my pet card, I put Seasons Past in the deck because
Oh, sure.
there is no graveyard recursion in this deck, and if you need to get those tree folk back, there's enough good gaps in your CMC costs where you could probably get 2 or 3 creatures,
Yeah.
a ramp spell, a land, stuff like that.
Yep.
And I mean, this is all with that $10 single card costing budget.
I'm surprised
constraint.
that card has not gone up in price yet. It's
a
I don't know
dollar.
if people have really noticed how powerful it actually is or what.
I was having that conversation about it today with somebody we were talking about. I can't remember what started it, but talking about Seasons Past. And I said I was really not into it when I first saw it. I was like, whatever. You can just run Praetor's Council, or you want either to go bigger or smaller, is what I thought.
Yep.
But man, whenever I've seen it cast, it's just devastating.
I mean, even if it hits 3 cards, wow.
Yes.
And
it goes back into your library, and I've seen it
Yes.
cast multiple times in a game.
We've both done that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do creatures here to wrap things up.
All right, let's do it.
I didn't make a ton of changes to the creatures. I wound up being okay. I was at first not into the defenders, but I kind of came around on it since they're all usually mana dorks. The one big change I really had here was Looming Altasaur out of Ixalan.
The white.
The white dinosaur. That's a 1/7 for 4 mana. And I would just replace that I would replace Black Poplar Shaman with that. I mean, yeah, he's a tree folk, which is nice, but 3 mana to regenerate another tree folk is a lot of mana to leave free. I would rather just have the giant efficient beat stick.
Yeah.
But other than that, I left most of the creatures the same. There's 1 or 2 changes, and I'll put them on my deck list. They're not worth really going into in detail, but for the most part, I left the creatures alone. But what about you guys?
I cut all the defenders,
Okay.
like I said earlier.
Including the Tree of Redemption and Tree of Perdition.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, like I said, I have 4 non-tree folk creatures in this deck, and it's Dramoka, Nylea, if we want to count her, and I kept Siege Rhino just for the life gain and the drain on your opponents, and I kept Silklash Spider to deal with flying creatures.
And it's worth noting, because people forget this, the 2 trees, Tree of Perdition, Tree of Redemption, are not tree folk. They are plants.
They are plants.
Yes, they are.
Because they don't have faces. That's what someone
Right.
told. That was their
Is that why?
I don't know, but like that was somebody told me, like, the rule of thumb is if it
I'm-
doesn't have a face, it's not a tree folk.
I'm
like,
pretty sure
all right.
they were in the Lord of the Rings movies, though, so I'm
Maybe,
not quite
right.
sure about that.
So how about you, Chris? What did you swap out there?
I took out a few of the defenders, the ones that really don't do too much for you. Now the mana dorks. I like having the mana dorks.
Because even if they just tap for 1,
Yes.
even if you don't have a bunch of other defenders out, they tap for 1 or whatever, that's still not bad when they block, dealing 4 damage.
Especially like Sylvan Caryatid, I had to leave that in there. I mean, it creates any color of mana. And it has hexproof. That is huge.
I don't know if it's as huge in Commander as it was in Standard, where like you needed to get it out of the way so you can swing through. I don't know if someone's
You know what? If I sit that up with that
That's
Slagworm
true.
armor and
it's swinging
at-
for 10. That's
Yes.
true. That's not nothing. You bet. That's a good point.
Yep.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, anything that gives you that little bit of an advantage, because that's not always going to happen, but it could happen at one point.
Absolutely, for sure.
So,
Yeah. There are a lot of amazing tree folk you could shove in this deck.
Yes.
But the problem I found with a lot of them were the ones I wanted to run were based on the number of forests you have.
Sure.
And with not a lot of duels and playing with, it'd take a lot of tinkering with your mana base to really shove enough basic forests in there to make sure you could get your, Colonian Twin Grove up to
right.
an 8/8 or something.
And there's also a lot of them are like 6 drops and 5 drops, and you
Yes.
can you just can't run as many of them as you would have to run more of these tree folk.
The one that I do find super interesting is Magnagoth Tree Folk from Planeshift.
Number of non-basic lands your opponents control?
For each basic land type among lands you control,
so
it
3.
has land walk of that type.
Yep.
So you're looking
Okay.
at plains, swamps, and forest walk if you put him in your deck.
So there's a pretty good chance he'll have a land walk ability for most players.
Yes.
So when that Mizzix player sits down across from you, you go,
Right,
No, I like the basic shell of it. I think there are just too many creatures overall for how mana intensive they are.
I tend to agree a little bit, although I didn't change it very much, but I think that's a lot of creatures to run in a deck when they're all that expensive. Like if they're all 1 or 2 drop elves, running 29 creatures is fine. Or my Edric deck has 30, but they're literally all 1 or 2 drops.
Yep.
Most of them are 1 drops, and I'm drawing to replace them quickly, so it makes sense there. I think this is a lot of creatures in a deck that isn't abusing it, that many creatures in some way.
Yeah.
Like if you're running 30 or something, I feel like maybe jack it up to 35 and run Lurking Predators.
Yeah.
or Wild Pair or something to take advantage of the fact that you have so many creatures.
Yep.
Or Descendant's Path in Max's case.
Yep.
So I think you want to, either pare it back a little bit and just focus on quality, or ratchet it up and focus on abusing that. Whereas I think 29 is kind of in that middle point where you don't do either of those two things well enough to care.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Now my final version of the deck I think had 26, so it's still fairly creature intensive, but it freed up a few spots for other things as well.
Did either of you put any tutors in the deck besides? I mean, I put a Diabolic Tutor in there just because it's a quarter.
I did too. And I looked at Enlightened Tutor and Worldly Tutor.
Yeah. Oh, I never thought about Worldly Tutor.
Because they're both at the $9 range. And with Worldly Tutor, you could tutor up, any creature that you could possibly need. I mean, maybe even just grab Dragonlord Dromoka, say you're running against people that are playing cards on your turn.
Yep.
And you just jam that Dragonlord in there and be like, okay, that's enough of that nonsense.
Yeah.
I did not. I did put a tutor in my version, but I put Dark Petition in.
That's another really good one, too.
It's 1 more mana than Diabolic, but you get 3 back, assuming you have Spell Mastery.
Yep.
So depending on how many ramp spells you would run, I would probably consider that, because, again, you're not going to probably be casting it in your first 2 or 3 turns. So turn 5, you have a couple ramp cards in your library, you can cast it. It becomes a demonic tutor at that point, essentially.
Yep.
So I that's the one I put in, but Diabolic's perfectly fine here as well.
The thing I wanted to note is I build a lot of 3-color decks, so you have to be very careful on how many tutors you put in.
Yes.
Because it starts skewing your curve on everything else and what you're trying to do with the deck.
Yeah.
You also have to be very careful with cards that have double and triple mana costs.
Yes.
Like 3 green, 3 black, whatever.
And then if you're going to go that route, then you really have to look at the rest of your deck and be like, okay, well, if I'm going to run all these heavy green spells, I need to put in more green cards.
Right.
So I can add more green lands to achieve the same goal.
Yeah.
Well, like True Conviction is a fantastic card, and if it was at 2 white and 3 colorless,
That'd be broken if it was like
it
that.
would. Right. Well, would. First, that's definitely a good point. But like,
It should be 12 colorless and
3
12
white.
but at 3 white, it's just, particularly in a budget deck where you don't have a perfect mana base, it's just too difficult to get out consistently.
Yeah. What about, so this is one I debated putting in here, Green Sun Zenith.
I don't know if there's any creatures that you need out enough to run it.
Except for Dromoka.
Yeah.
Maybe,
That would be
yeah.
the only
That's
other
about
thing
it.
Because Dromoka, honestly, playing Dromoka pretty much, it puts a target on your back, but it also saves you on your turn where you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you can't put cards like Privileged Position or Asceticism in here, it's definitely a worthwhile addition.
And I got to say that it is, if you ever do play Dromoka, it's going to be extremely satisfying every time you go, you can't cast that on my turn. I'm sorry.
Right.
It's
And
fun
then 2
to,
turns later, no, you can't do that. It's my turn. See, she's sitting right there.
it's fun being a green-white mage saying no like a
Right.
blue mage.
The one other card I waffled on and I wound up putting in the final cut of the deck was Arachnogenesis, which is
Surprise spiders!
Surprise spiders. Because they're 2/3, so like,
Activate my trap card.
right. So for each attacking creature, you put a 2/3 spider in play with reach, and non-spider creatures deal no damage this turn. So basically, it's a fog, and you make a spider for each creature that's attacking you. And they're 2/3s, and they have reach. So basically, you're going to take no damage that turn. But on the crackback, that card's already good, like swinging with 2/3 spiders. Except for in this case, they're dealing 3 damage, not just 2. So
Okay.
that very easily kills somebody. Like if someone thinks they have the alpha strike on you with 4 or 5 creatures, and you swing in your spiders, because you've killed someone the turn before, and you've left yourself tapped out, and they're like, well, I'm just going to kill you. Surprise spiders.
Rawr.
Now they're tapped out, and you have the crackback swinging back with 4, 5, 6 spiders for 3 damage apiece.
Yep.
In addition to your creatures that you now can untap.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is a really good trick card as well. And you can use it just like offensively, even if you're like, oh, he's swinging at me with 2 creatures, and I would normally take it, but I'm going to make a couple spiders and have them for reach defenders as well. I mean, it's just a good card.
Yeah.
And I think it's even better in a Doran deck.
Yeah, very, very true.
So, all right, we're going to get these decks up and tapped out, and we'll have links on the YouTube page next week when the show goes live. So what are your final thoughts on just Doran in general?
We said this before. I love playing against Adam's Doran deck. It, like we stated, it changes how you think about your own deck because of the combat math. And it's just interesting. Our local meta, we don't see a lot of this deck or this general at all.
That's the only deck I've seen is Adam's Doran deck.
Yeah.
The only other Doran I've ever seen was last Modern tournament I was at. They gave it away as one of the
Prizes.
prizes.
Oh, nice.
Judge foil.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I think he's a great card. He makes for an interesting commander. I think a lot of the Doran decks probably have a lot of overlap among cards because you're just running tree folks with big butts.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not anyone's fault. That's just how the deck, works. I think he's a cool, interesting deck that makes you pay attention. I'm a big fan, and I'm glad we got this for the deck to do deck tech on.
Yeah, I would love to see a Doran deck where they play Doran as a general, but the rest of the deck has nothing to do with them.
I was
They
just
just
thinking.
never cast Doran. Sure.
I was just
or
thinking
just cast
about
Doran
that.
and just sit on him and
Sure.
just start swinging. You just sit building up your mana and a few enchantments and artifacts here and there. And they kill Doran and then you're like, "Brah, guess what? Surprise! It's something different."
Yeah, I always have those thoughts of like you have these pretty linear commanders, and Doran kind of falls into that. You usually have to build your deck to follow Doran.
Yep.
Joyra's the same way. There are certain
Yep.
commanders where that scream, "You build me this way and no other way," and I always try to would find it interesting to take one of these commanders that are like that and don't listen to the commander.
Sure.
Yeah.
But then you get the complaint of why are you even running it? Then this card's better. This card's better.
Well,
Because
that-
it's jank, and I really want to build a jank deck like
well,
that.
my favorite part so far of playing my Veil with a Nightclad deck
I hate
is
that deck.
If no one knows, but if no one knows what it is, they're just like, "What is going on there?" Because it's an artifact deck. Like I'm doing abusive artifact things, and then people then forget. They're like, "Okay, I guess you're doing all that stuff." And then I play Vela. They're like, "Oh, I can't block anything. Oh no,
I'll block with these 6/6 dragons.
No,
you
will
cannot
not.
block with those.
I've enjoyed that deck so much more since I switched it off of morphs into artifacts, and I get to do like abusive artifact stuff now too, which I didn't have an artifact deck, so that's been fun. So yeah, Doran is kind of the same vibe. You get to do weird stuff that you don't normally do, and that's always cool. All right, I think that is it for this week of Commander Central. Until next week, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.